And by everyone, did you mean 0? I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
They're going to trickle in. All right.
Hopefully we'll get a few more in. Hello, everyone.
Cool. Got some folks joining. Welcome, everybody. Thank you all so much for joining today for Selling First Impressions. We've got Evelyn Lee here from the Practice of Architecture, and we also have Tyler Samola from Growth Detect. We're going to give another moment or so for, then we'll give a quick intro and go ahead and get started with today's discussion.
Yeah, in the meantime, if you all want to let us know where you're from or who you work for, please feel free to drop it in the chat. These Designing for Success webinars are really conversational, so we like to get things kicked off soon. I
think everyone should be able to access the chat, but if you have any issues, just let me know. Yeah, I think it's set to everyone. Awesome. All right, I'm going to start off with a quick intro about today's guests. So first off, we have Tyler Samola. He's the founder of Growth Detect and the manager of content and social strategy at Monograph. He's got architecture degrees from the University of Michigan and Princeton University, and has worked with various firms and spent 2.5 years running his own design studio. Growth Detect is a passion project that's born from his journey through architecture and tech startups, where he discovered valuable sales and marketing tactics, and he aims to bring these insights back to architects, helping them confidently grow their income and business. And then we also have Evelyn Lee, AIA, and the founder and practice of architecture. Evelyn has been on the client side for over a decade and has spent the last 5 years in tech, helping create exceptional employee experiences while growing the business. She's a startup advisor and fractional COO to small and medium-sized business firms, the founder of the Practice of Architecture, and the host of the podcast Practice Disrupted.
Great. It's so nice to see some familiar faces in here. It looks like we have, it looks like we're almost covering all the time zones, at least in the lower 49, or 48. Yes, lower 48.
We're missing Hawaii. Where are we at?
Yeah, Hawaii, I think.
Hawaii and Alaska. Where
Alaska. But welcome. This is meant to be informal. We're going to just jump right in. I don't know, Tyler, was there a question that we wanted to release first, or did you want to go? Actually, I have a question for you. I take that back. So, we were looking at starting this presentation, and you came up with a great name, kind of Selling First Impressions. So talk to us about why that's important for architects and how we are doing it now, and how why we should be doing it better, I guess.
Yeah, I think I can definitely speak from my own experience in this, but we have first impressions so often, right? So it's whether that's a potential client that's reached out to us and we're meeting them for the first time over a virtual call or in person, or just presenting yourself around different areas and going and doing networking and things like that. Those first impressions really make a huge difference, and it's something that I didn't really realize, I would say, until going more through a sales role before, because you realize how much your energy bleeds into how other people are kind of perceiving any situation or event as well. And so having a clear process for that first encounter with someone is usually really important. And I can tell you that when I used to run my own, architecture design studio, I would kind of go into each client conversation, or I should say each conversation with a potential client, just being like, oh, I wonder what they want to do. I'll just ask them some questions about the project and kind of see what they're thinking, see where they're at, try to get an understanding of what their vision is for it. But I didn't really have a clear or concrete path to follow in that call. And so what that resulted in is kind of like every single call was a little bit different. I walked away not necessarily knowing or having all of the information that I needed, right? I was kind of just like playing a guessing game, treating each one almost in a very custom way. And that led to me not being able to necessarily position myself in the best way possible in terms of like offering the most value to the client or just understanding exactly what their needs are. And I think it also left them a little bit more confused as well, like in terms of like, what is the process? How does this work actually moving forward? And so I think that first meeting that you have with potential clients is really important, just for setting the tone of what it is like to work with you, but also just gathering as much information as possible and helping you to qualify the project and qualify the client and make sure that there's someone that you want to work with as well.
Right. I think that's an excellent opportunity to throw up our first poll question. So Bo, if you could do that. And after you answer that, if you wouldn't mind typing in your chat box, if you are very confident, is there a process that you're currently using? And if you aren't very confident, if you're willing to share a little bit more about why, that would be great in the chat. We're happy to answer things on the fly as well.
Yes. And you might be what's it called? I think I was very confident with client conversations when I ran my own architecture design studio. I didn't realize until afterwards that I was actually really bad at it because I didn't have a clear process. But I'm like, oh, I enjoy talking to people. I enjoy having conversations. So I'm confident having conversations. It's just that I wasn't actually, having effective conversations.
Right. I guess there's a difference in measurement between just having a quote unquote conversation and actually getting off the phone and understanding how well did you do to convert that potential prospect into an actual client um, and ensure that that client is actually going to be a good fit for you and just really answer questions that are ultimately critical to your business more so than just like a nice, how are you doing? I'm an architect type of conversation.
Yeah, because there's so much work actually that has to happen. There's so many things that have to happen in order for that meeting to go well, right? You have to build the relationship with them, right? And you want to make them feel comfortable. But you also, just from a business standpoint, you have to gather information about what they want to do and make sure that you understand their needs so that you can then go and, create a proposal or do whatever those next steps will be.
Yeah. So Kurt chimed in, thank you for sharing, Kurt, lack of confidence. And Bo, if you could show this, the results too. Okay. Not very confident, average confident, very confident, awesome. If anyone that answered, if the 2 out of the 13 that answered very confident, you want to chime in and share your just share your resources or how you walk into a meeting more confidently, please feel free to do so. Lack of confidence, fear of not having answers to all of their questions or providing inaccurate information. I will say, having been on the client side, and Tyler, maybe it would be good for you to share your own experiences, but the last 10 years of my life, I was on the client side, I was writing the RFP and sitting on the client side during interviews. And I respected an architect for saying, I don't know that information, but I'll get back to you. And then that actually gave them a really good reason for them to follow up with me after the interview. Like I respected that more than somebody trying to frankly just fumble through an answer. So that's from a client perspective, that's what I would recommend. Kurt, I don't know, Tyler, if you have any other suggestions.
Yes, you should not be afraid to say that you're not sure and you're going to look into it. I think that's it's an easy way to get yourself into a hole, is feeling like you have to have all of the answers, which you don't. Also, this process that I'm going to walk through today takes a lot of that pressure off of you, and kind of puts the pressure on the client in the best way, puts the pressure on the client to really just tell you what it is that they want to do. So it's much more client driven. It's much less architect driven, right? I'm not going to teach you how to pitch your firm because that's not something that you should be doing in your first meeting. You should be gathering information and kind of building relationships in that first meeting instead, so you can take pressure off yourself.
Right. I actually think that's a good end. I don't know, Tyler, if you meant to go through all of these polls at the beginning, but I almost think it's a good time to open up poll question number 2 if you're interested.
Yes, I think that's a great time. Then we can jump into kind of what the process is for this.
Yeah, so what do you typically use the first client meeting for? So while we're at it, Karen dropped into the Q&A and she asked that, they stated that they're not very confident because of all the things they don't know or they're not sure about. So kind of taking what we said in answer to Kurt's question or Kurt's comment and piggybacking off of that, I also felt so much more immediately at ease if I had known that the architect coming in to interview for us had done a little research of not only the company, but the people interviewing themselves. So we usually always let the client know who's going to be on the interview panel. And I definitely had individual who came into and over-explained architecture to me. I just felt like I was getting I'm trying to not use the word mansplain, but like they approached me like I wasn't an architect, and it was obvious that they had no idea that I was an architect. And my reaction to those individuals were so much different than somebody that comes in and says, "Oh, Evelyn, I'm a huge fan of your podcast." Like that immediately, I was just like, "Oh, wow, it formed an immediate connection to me." So I think even just making sure when you're going into meetings, if you can ask in advance who's going to be present at the meeting so you can do your research, can go miles when it comes to building just like building an instant connection there. Tyler, any
You're
more
much more
thoughts?
humble than I would be. If I was an FAIA, I would just wear an FAIA tag with me everywhere I go.
I have my Slack jacket on, even though I left
Yeah.
in January. No, I mean, no, I am just like, I'm usually like, I'm an architect. Thank you for re-clarifying that for the third time.
Yeah.
Let's see if we can look at the answers to the poll questions. Anyone else have any questions regarding it? So it looks like they typically use a client meeting for client qualification, pitching your firm, project discovery. So yes, I would
Yeah,
say that's an expected response. I don't know, Tyler,
I
if you
think
were
so too.
expecting something different.
Well, I guess not after saying that you shouldn't pitch your firm. I guess I wasn't expecting that many people to do it, but um, I think firms do it maybe more often than it might not be the entire purpose of that meeting, right? To pitch your firm, but I'd be surprised if they don't pitch it at all.
Okay.
But
Did you,
yeah, project discovery is great. It's kind of a cheating question that I put up here because it's a little bit of both, right? Client qualification, project. It's actually a little bit of all three, but it's just you don't want to focus too much on one or the other. But project discovery is good too. Absolutely.
okay, so speaking of project discovery, I guess other people have probably closed that window. Mine is still open. Do you want to talk about the 4-step process that we're going to walk people through today?
Yes. Yes. So what I'm walking you through today is a process that I call discovery calls or discovery meetings. And essentially, again, that's just the first meeting that you have with a prospective client. And the reason that's important is because that's your opportunity to make a solid first impression, to learn about the client, learn about the project, and also set the next meeting up for success, which is really important and something that's often overlooked. It's actually a really simple process. And it's 4 steps. It's building rapport is the first step. It's doing an upfront contract as the second one, which is a misleading name. And you're probably wondering why we're asking people to sign a contract in the first meeting. Then you do a deep dive, which is definitely like the meat and potatoes of this meeting, where you're asking these questions and trying to get an understanding of what it is that they're actually looking to do and what their needs are. And then the end of this is the next steps, where you actually do devote time at the end of the meeting to talk about what is going to happen next, and even to set time aside to make sure that that happens. I usually recommend that these meetings can actually happen in 30 minutes. They can happen really fast. It's enough time period, usually for most projects. It does depend a little bit on what types of projects and that you're doing, but within 30 minutes, you can definitely cover all 4 of these steps, make a really great first impression, start building solid relationships, and set that next meeting up for success.
Great. So we talked a little bit about building rapport just at the top of the hour. What would you or what are the subsets of the tasks within building rapport? And I'm going to put that list in the chat, as well as your relative time zones or time frames that you set up for each step.
Yeah, that was actually a perfect forecasting, Evelyn, when you said I always felt so much more comfortable and so much more excited. I had just a different reaction to people that came into me, and they knew who they were speaking with at some level. And that's exactly what building rapport is, because it can be really difficult to make personal connections with your prospective clients, especially if it's if it's all business, so to say, right? If they jump in and you're just immediately starting to talk about the project and what their needs are, and you don't spend any time really trying to set a strong foundation of a personal relationship as well. And so building rapport is all about just devoting the first 5 minutes or so of that meeting to having a more personal connection, which helps them to get more comfortable, which is great because if they're more comfortable, then they're going to open up more and you're just going to learn more about what their needs are. And so building rapport is really simple. You research who you're going to be talking with, just like everyone was talking about, right? You take a moment to research them, and that's either on their company page, that can be on their bio, that can be on their LinkedIn, and you're trying to find something that you're trying to find a commonality with them that you can relate to at almost any level. And so for Evelyn, for example, it could be you're listening to their podcast, but if it's someone that, isn't necessarily well known, maybe you're trying to see where they grew up or where they went to university or where they volunteer at. And there's just some kind of commonality there. Even if they volunteer and you volunteer, it doesn't have to be that strong in terms of what it is. And then the first question that you ask when you actually get to that meeting is just a setup of the research that you've done. It's, something like, Evelyn, I noticed on LinkedIn that you run your own community of architects. That's really cool. I've been part of a community as well. Like, how's that going? Right. So you're just almost introducing, you're being upfront about the fact that you took some time before the call to understand who you were meeting with, and then you're asking them a question and giving them an opportunity to respond. And after they've had a chance to respond, then you just take that moment to relate to them and say, like I was saying before, right? So Evelyn, you have a community. How is that going? What have you been doing with that? And then it's like, yeah, I've been part of a few communities as well. I really enjoy it. Like, how much time each week do you spend managing that community, right? We're not talking about architecture. We're not talking about the project. We're not talking about anything. We're just trying to connect on a personal level, share a laugh, relate in some way, and just take a moment for everyone to get comfortable before you actually dive into talking explicitly about what that project is. And it does exactly what Evelyn was talking about, right? It just gets everyone comfortable. It also gets you comfortable too. It kind of helps to get those jitters out and lets everyone settle into the conversation.
Yeah, I think it's a great way to break the ice. We were developing even at Slack and Salesforce, kind of how to run better meetings. So building rapport is true of potential client meetings, but I actually think it's true of any meeting you're running. Just kind of set the framework for open discussion, whether it's a team meeting or a project meeting. You get to learn about one another, especially in this virtual space. Right? So I feel like a lot more teams are working in different locations, not all in one place these days. So it's an opportunity to build rapport and give you additional insights and opportunities to actually follow up with not only the team but with the client later if you pick up on some of those things and you just can't follow up in the immediate conversation.
Yeah, that's a great point. And it just, sometimes you can be surprised about what you discover just from taking a moment to build rapport, is that you actually have a stronger connection with this person than what you realized. For maybe you learned that you grew up around the same area or something like that. And clients actually do, like, they remember those things, right? They're going to remember that maybe even more than the conversation about the project itself, because they're going to remember how they felt a lot more than the things that they said. And so trying to get that warm connection, I used to try to have a goal of try to share a laugh in some way about something, right? When you're building rapport before you actually jump into the business side.
Great. So now we're moving into upfront contract, which you're saying should take about 1 or 2 minutes. So what is this upfront contract that you're talking about, Tyler?
Yes, upfront contract, just essentially another name for an agenda for the meeting. And this is so important because, as you know, it's really easy for conversations to go on a tangent relatively quickly, especially when you're meeting with potential clients that aren't familiar with this process. They might not know exactly what it is you're trying to learn or what you need to know in order to get the information that you need and evaluate whether or not you're the right fit for them and you can kind of help them solve their problems. And so the upfront contract is really just taking a moment right after you've built rapport to set the agenda for the meeting. And that's a really simple process. You start off with appreciation just by taking the time to tell them that you appreciate, I know that you're busy. I really appreciate you taking the time to meet with me and tell me more about potentially working together, right? And then the
Yeah,
next and then the
go
next
ahead.
step is setting the expectations, which is really the large part. But you want to be very clear about exactly what you're looking to do, and you want to explain to them why it's a benefit to them, right? So it's like, I want to take the next 45 minutes to, or the next 30 minutes, I guess, right? I want to take the next 30 minutes to really dive into your exact needs for the project so that we can understand how we can best serve you. Right. So it's putting it in their terms. And it's also maybe being upfront about things like, I know that it can be complex and I might be asking difficult questions, but it's important for me to understand what your needs are. And then the last thing is a simple confirmation, right? Does that sound fair to you? I always like to say fair because I don't know. It's the good F word. It's the
It's
good
a
F
good
word.
effort.
It's the good F
Um,
word.
and again, like when you're creating meetings that matter, I think having an agenda and getting everyone on the same page at the beginning of the meeting is really important. So not only for marketing, but for more broadly. But we'll get specifically more in client development and marketing in the deep dive portion of this talk. So let's go into the meat of the conversation where you really understand more about your client, but more importantly, whether or not you the client's going to be a good fit for you and your firm. So why don't you kick it off onto the deep dive? And if
Yes,
anyone has any questions about upfront contract or rapport, please feel free to ask them. Sorry, go ahead.
yes. No, that's okay. The deep dive is, I think, what everyone thinks about when they imagine having this conversation with the client. It's where you're beginning to ask them questions about their project, trying to understand what their exact needs are. And I think it's also a point where I generally see the most mistakes happen once you get into the conversation. And usually this happens in the form of asking a lot of quantity-based questions, right? So it's like, like how much square feet are you thinking about? What's the size of the lot? How many bedrooms, how many bathrooms do you want if you're talking about a residential client? Or you might be talking to a commercial client and saying, how many units are you looking for? And the problem with that, right, is for one, it assumes that the client knows exactly what they want, which they don't. We know that. And working with clients, right, in the past, they're going to change their mind in like 2 weeks, probably into the project, and they're going to change their mind again 2 weeks later. Right. And so it assumes that they know exactly what they want, which they don't, because it's your job to kind of use your knowledge and education to inform them on like kind of what their best options and solutions are. And the other problem with it is it also kind of makes them feel as though they're being like interviewed, right? But in the worst way, almost like you're grilling them and they need to have these answers. And if they don't have these answers, then, they're not in a good position and maybe it's not ready to move forward. And so
So
what
you're
I
talking
generally,
about like questions where people are just like running, like where the architect's beginning to run and jump into the program. So for like a single family home, like I need to know exactly how many bedrooms you want, how many bathrooms, do you know your square footage, what's your budget, and just kind of like, I guess for
that's
lack
right.
of a better way, just kind of like like one
It's
after
almost like
another,
I've
get
seen
like
these
run through
before,
them.
and
Yeah,
I've seen a lot of them, right? They're like these are the answers that I need to generate my like proposal, right? To
right.
understand my fee, to understand how much these things are going to cost, but they change so often. But I've had architects quite literally like lift up a piece of paper and be like, these are the answers that I need for everything, and they're almost always all quantitative, right? To your point, like what's your budget, square footage, things, almost as if you want to just be able to kind of calculate what the obvious thing is there. And I think it's better to lean more on qualitative questions instead.
Yeah.
And so when you're talking about qualitative questions, or when you're just talking about asking them questions at all, you want to remember things like the tone of your questions matters. And so what I always like to approach these conversations with is just being super curious, right? That's always the I guess the tone that I have in the back of my mind whenever I'm meeting with a potential client. It's like, just be curious about what it is that they want to do, because again, you don't want to come off as aggressive by asking these questions. You want them to feel comfortable. The other part about that is that you're going to give them an opportunity to pitch to you. That's really what the goal of this meeting is that you want to get as much information out of them, and you really want to talk very little about yourself. These discovery meetings should be extremely client-centric and not very architect-centric at all, because you want to use this 30 minutes. You want to get as much information as you can about the project, so that you can understand how to best position yourself in your firm. The other part is using open-ended questions instead of closed-ended questions. Really easy way to think through that is just a closed-ended question is just a yes or no question. Open-ended is allows them to kind of give more of a structured like sentence response and talk more about their feelings and their thought processes behind that. And what we're going to talk about today is how you can find the impact of a lot of the challenges that they're having and keep on diving deeper and deeper into their pains, so that you're not just understanding each of their challenges at a superficial level, but you're also understanding it at an emotional level as well.
Yeah, my immediate response there is I feel like people always love the opportunity to talk about themselves, right? And especially and talk about the project and why it's so important to them, and to give them the space to allow that to happen. I know, and I've been there. Architects want to walk me through their portfolio, but for me being on the client side, I'm judging, how well can is this a person that I want to work for or work with for the next year and a half, right? And if they're coming in and they're like telling me all these things and trying to build up their, you already made it. In my mind, you already made it to the interview. Like,
Right.
we pre-screened architects, you're here. I do know something about you. Now I want to make sure that you understand me and where I'm coming from. So continue to build that rapport through the deep dive and just by being an active listener.
Yes. Yes. Active listening. So important. The three layers of pain that I generally recommend that you're listening for as you're beginning this conversation is superficial pain, impact pain, and pain relief. And so superficial pain is usually that first initial mention of a challenge that they have. And usually this can come up naturally in the conversation. Sometimes you might have to suss it out of the client. But for example, if we're talking about a residential client and they're looking to build a new house, for example, I think a really natural question to get some superficial pain out of them is something like, what are the challenges that you currently face in your current home, right? Because no matter what client you're speaking to, nobody wakes up one day and just decides they want to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars or millions of dollars, depending on the project that you're talking about. There has to be a pain or a challenge or something that they're trying to solve in order to get to what they want, right? And you are the vehicle, right? The architect is the vehicle that's going to basically get them there. And so you want to understand at a superficial level, what are the primary challenges or the biggest issues that they have with their current situation? And after you identify that, then you want to understand how it impacts them on a personal level. And so this is the impact pain, both at a personal level and at a team level, depends on who you're talking to. But they might say something like, we can't, the house is too small. We can't have family gatherings at our place, or we can't have family gatherings in our kitchen or something like that. Right. And so you want to understand then, can you describe to me like how this small kitchen impacts your day-to-day activities? And you're almost trying to get them to play out their regular day and get an understanding of what those like little annoyances and frustrations are. And you can also ask this at a team level too, if we're talking about like a commercial or an office, right? It's like, how do you see this playing out for your team on a day-to-day basis? And the idea is that we're taking something general, right? Just like a global pain, and then we're trying to understand specifically how it's impacting people at a human level, right? And then the next layer is the pain relief, which is probably my favorite because they're kind of in a moment now where they're just venting to you about the challenges that they're having, and now you want to get them to imagine what it would be like if those challenges didn't exist. So it can be something like, what would your day look like if that challenge didn't exist, right? What would your day-to-day look like if your kitchen wasn't too small? And then you're getting them to envision, right, what their life would be like, and also describe what that life would be like without these challenges. And what's really important about that is if you're kind of listening carefully, this isn't going to happen just once while you're diving deep into the conversation. It's probably going to happen maybe 3 or 4 times as you capture a superficial pain and then understand at a human level and then understand what that pain relief is, you walk away from this meeting with really powerful information that you can use in your next meetings, because you understand not only how it's impacting that person at a personal level, but you understand exactly what that ideal outcome is that they want to get with each challenge that they have with their current situation. Does that make sense?
That makes sense to me. If it doesn't make sense to you, please let us know. Please let us know if this is at all helpful to you. You are really quiet. I know it's Thursday. I know some of you are at AIA-24 and are probably playing catch up in the background. It's all okay. I'm guilty of that as well. You know, it's as you're going through these things, one thing came to mind though, Tyler, is the opportunity, if you do bring them on a client, at the end of the meeting or at the end of the project, or even like after 30 days of occupancy, if you revisit these pain points with them and have them talk about it again, and to the extent of whether or not they found that those pain points have been resolved in the final product, and that actually could lead to a great testimonial. But it's just like a great baseline to form with the current client or with the prospective client.
Yes, I totally agree with that. Could be because the best testimonials are the ones that kind of show a transformation, right? So if you're saying, I couldn't do this before and I can do this now, those are always the ones that hit the hardest. So yeah, definitely making note of these, and you can use them. I'll talk about how you can use them with this next part, but you can also use them, like you're saying, at the end of the project for testimonials. I would also recommend trying to get that it's always good to ask for testimonials in the middle of the project too. Usually we try to wait till the end, but can ask for testimonials just about their experience in working with you in the middle of the project. So those are good to have as well.
Yeah, so we got a question that said the first and the second layers, so the superficial pain and the impact pain, seem very similar. So can you dive a little bit deeper on that one?
I think the superficial pain, what you're usually going to hear is just like it. I sometimes it can jump right into the impact pain, but usually with the superficial pain, it's going to be something really general. Not enough storage space, kitchen is too small, house isn't big enough, right? So you hear general answers like that, but you don't understand then how it's impacting them at a human level, right? And so that's
Right.
or at a personal level, and so I think that's what it is. At an does that make sense?
Karen, if you can, this hopefully we're helping you. Please feel free to reply to that if it did. For me, yes, we got a thumbs up. But for me, it was always this is as a workplace strategist, right? Being on the interview side, trying to get the client so then I can serve them on the client side. You know, people are like, oh well, you know, at the time, this was pre-pandemic, it was always like, we're running out of office space. Like, you know, that's like the high end, the superficial pain. And it's like, okay, but like, let's dig into that a little further. Like, you know, what's your seating arrangements? What's your growth look like? You know, what ratios are you using from open to closed space? That type of thing,
Yeah.
right? So get a little bit more it allows you to understand where you need to ask your next questions to dig a little deeper, I feel.
I mean, I think it's also, you can think about this at a scale, right? You get a global scale, like we're running out of office space, which is more,
Now
it
we
doesn't
have
have,
too
it
much
doesn't,
office space, but
right. It
yes,
doesn't,
go
yeah,
ahead.
it is, right. But it doesn't have a time attached to it, and it doesn't have like a person attached to it. And that's really what the impact level pain is, right? You're taking a time scale. So I'm saying like a regular day, your day-to-day activities, how does it impact you, or how does it impact your team? So if someone's saying we don't have enough office space, right? It could be like, how does that impact your team on a day-to-day basis? And then you're going to learn things like sometimes there's people that don't have somewhere to sit, and people are instead working in conference rooms, and these different challenges that are happening, right? So you're getting a really clear understanding of what those challenges are. And why this is important, like aside, you might just be thinking, well, maybe this is obvious, right? Maybe it's obvious that they just don't have enough space. Why is it important to suss out exactly what those challenges are? It's because when you're going to then present that proposal to them, you have these specific instances and stories that you can tell as you're walking through the proposal to say, you were saying that people are now meeting in the conference room to work rather than to actually like have a meeting. Here's how we're going to solve that. right? And so you can speak to those specific instances, and the more specific that you can get, the more that people like Evelyn that were in the client situation are going to actually believe what you're saying, right? Because you've taken the time to get specific about how you're going to solve each of these challenges.
Right. So I think unless we have any more questions, we're going to move on to next steps.
All right, next steps. I think probably the most overlooked aspect of these discovery meetings of all time, right? It's so easy to spend all the time talking through and trying to qualify the project or qualify the client, and then forgetting about setting next steps. And the problem with that is that if you don't set next steps, then it's just really going to slow down the process or completely derail the process altogether. Because if you don't take a moment to define exactly what's going to happen next and even schedule what's going to happen next, then you're just creating extra work and extra steps for yourself after this meeting happens.
And
right?
I would, before you go too deep on that, Tyler, too, because I know we have some architect, well, I don't, I'm making an assumption that we do have some architects that have joined us that are responding to requests for proposals, right? On a larger government agency, school district. So I think I always, there were architects that were like, you could tell they were feeling really good about themselves in the interview, and they're like, great. And then they just shook my hand and they headed off. But and I was like, okay, I guess they assume that we're they assume that us as a large enterprise, we will contact them. But I think, just even having that conversation of the architect reaffirming what our next steps are with them, what the follow-up is, and then even saying good, so I rest assured, if this, once we get this project, always come from a place of optimism, we will have a team ready to go at that time when you're ready to roll on the project. But just making sure, reaffirming with the client what their next steps are too. So sorry, before we went too deep, I just wanted to make sure we weren't cutting in half some of our audience here. So go ahead.
Yes, thank you for it. We don't want to leave out the RFPs, but that's a great. I'm just imagining that. Great, awesome. All right, shake your hands. I'll see you later. Hope to hear from you soon. So the first part of the next steps is kind of just calming down the conversation and giving them an opportunity to express anything that they haven't said yet. So it's, I know that we've covered a lot today. Is there anything else that you think I should know? And that's important. It just gives them the space to just take a moment and consider if there was something else that they, just like you came into the conversation wanting to learn things, maybe they came into the conversation wanting to mention things that just haven't come up naturally yet. And so that's a powerful question just to help ramp it down and also give them the opportunity and give them that space. And then you want to take the time to set the next meeting, right? And at the same time, you're also kind of reaffirming and being clear that you were an active listener during this call. So it sounds like, so you'd say something like, it sounds like your primary challenges are X, Y, and Z. This is something that we're really familiar with. How about we take some time next Tuesday at 2 p.m. to walk you through exactly how we've solved those same challenges with other clients, right? And so you want to take the time to put something on the calendar and make sure that everyone has agreed to what's going to happen next. And then you describe what happens in that next meeting. In that next meeting, we'll walk you through, exactly how we've helped to solve these challenges for some other clients, how we would do it for you, and walk you through the proposal. And if you're ready to move forward, then we have a team that's ready to go and we can start as soon as next week. Just like Evelyn was saying, you want to be assumptive and you want to be clear that in that next meeting, you'll be asking for their business, which I think is also the third poll question, right?
Yes.
I'm curious here because everyone has a different flow, and some firms have longer sales cycles or shorter sales cycles. But if we could pull that up now, it'd probably be a good time.
Yeah, Bo, if you can launch that for us, that would be amazing.
So yes, how many client meetings?
Go ahead. Sorry, we're both
no,
reading
you're
it
good. I'm really
simultaneously.
curious. I'm really curious to know how many client meetings does it typically take for you to win a client?
And I would obviously say for optimization, for understanding your pipeline, for being more efficient with your work, you want this to be, if you're at 4+ now, we want to figure out a way to get you down to at least 2, right?
Yes. Yeah, I think that's the benefit of putting these systems in place, right? If you get really good at doing discovery meetings, then you can really learn everything that you need to, and you're setting up that next meeting, which I think in an ideal scenario is where you're going to be presenting the proposal to them.
So
I could
I
see
have
instances where sometimes it takes 3 because you do a discovery meeting and then maybe there's other stakeholders that want to get involved and then you do the proposal. But yeah, so it depends, but I'm curious.
So while we wait for people to answer that, I want to run a little different scenario by you, because you also talked about how and I'm backing up a little bit, admittedly, but you also talked about how the deep dive section is a good way to measure whether or not they're going to be a good client for your firm. So what are some things, and please, in the audience too, feel free to chime on these, but what are some things that you might hear or have heard from clients where you're like, okay, we've hit a point where it's obvious that we're not going to be able to work together. And I think one for me, right, is if the client is so concerned about price up front, and that's the first thing that they're asking you before you even had a conversation with them. But go ahead.
Yeah, part of this I think is the vast majority of clients that you're working with don't have that much exposure to working with an architect, right? Maybe in best case scenario, they've worked with them a couple of times, but I think probably the majority of the clients that we're all working with have maybe never worked with an architect before. So they're just not familiar with what that process is. There are a couple of red flags that I like to listen to, right? One is just them endlessly talking about price. Another one is if they've worked with an architect before and they're describing that as being a poor experience. I do want to understand that more, right? Like why was it a poor experience? Is it just that they weren't happy with the outcome, or was there something about maybe the normal part of working with an architect
The
that they
permitting
didn't
process
like?
was taking so
Right, the
long.
permitting process. Yeah, it's
Right.
so each time you kind of hear one of those potential red flags, I would dive deeper. But actually, let's talk about the price one specifically, because I know that's someone that gives that's one that gives architects endless anxiety, right? Is talking about price. So if I'm meeting with the client that might be leaning that seems to care a lot more about price. In my mind, I'm immediately thinking, all right, this might not be the most ideal client to work with if this is all that they care about and this is the main thing that they focus on. I don't usually recommend in this first meeting diving into potential like pricing and costs. But I can see where in an instance, if you have someone that's really pressing you for this information, where you can do it. And I think a really great way to do this is to say something like, typically for projects like this, our fees range between X and Y dollars. Are you comfortable with that? And specifically if it's a client that I'm not sure if I want to work with, I'm gonna give that a higher number, right? I do add a little bit of a
A
pain in the
buffer.
ass tax, yeah, on top of those for those clients. But what's great about that is that you do just take a moment to, for one, if they are pressing you, say, there's still things that I need to understand first, so let me ask you some more questions. But then once you have just a general understanding of what that is, and if you're comfortable enough with it, then you can give them that range, and you watch very closely to see what their reaction to that is, because it's either going to be something like, oh my gosh, or it's going to be like, oh, okay, like not as bad as I was thinking. And so based on that, maybe you're just helping to put them at ease, and you're also just understanding whether or not this is something worth your time moving forward, right? Because they might
Right.
say, oh, that's way too expensive. Then it's like, well, you know, that makes sense. I understand if that's where the position that you're in. I'm here if you change your mind. Here's some other architects you can go to if you want.
Great. So we got back the poll question. We do have a few in at 4+. So hopefully some of these tactics will help you bring that down a little bit. Most 50% medians in at 2.
It's pretty good.
Some
Yeah.
at 1.
One
Those
call
ones, I know,
closers.
I like,
Those are good ones.
wow. Yes. So I have another question for you, regarding next steps in a bad client.
Yeah.
More of a cautionary tale. There are some people, and this is frankly is even people that have called and asked for my help regarding a little bit off topic, but regarding alternative careers and alternative paths. And I'm kind of like, unfortunately, like one, either don't have the time to support that right now, or two, I actually refer them to somebody else and they become really agitated and annoyed with me. And then they, because I can't, because I'm not available to help and they close out the meeting very poorly. So I would say even
Interesting.
even if you have identified that this is a person that you don't want to work with, I think you should consider how you end that meeting in a way that maybe you're not the right architect for them, but if you end it in a good place with honesty, they still might refer you when they have a friend that is looking for like architects, and they can say, oh, I interviewed with these 3 architects. Just something to
Yes.
consider.
That's a great point. It's really funny because I probably get like 3 or 4 of those messages a week on LinkedIn from people that are saying this, I'm having these challenges at work. Like, what should I do? And I usually respond in this way to say something like, hey, I'm sorry to hear that that's the experience that you're having. That's not really my specialty, but these people are really great at it. And so I think that's a good way, even if you're talking about the price thing. I understand that that's position. I understand that that's the position that you're in. That's not our specialty to work on budgets of that size, but here's some other architects that you can go to if that's what you're looking for.
Right. And I would just say from a perspective, like from a you know, I try to make as much time as I can for others. So like
Right.
my response is like if we ended that meeting well, then in my meeting notes I'll be like, follow up with this person when I'm available to follow up with that person. If we end up meeting poorly, you're gonna go into like my don't follow up with this person inbox. It's just because I want to work with people that are very collegial and get things done together in the most optimistic way possible. So so even if they frustrate you, don't let it show, I guess is what I'm trying to say, and
Mm,
refer them to somebody that can help
yeah.
if possible. Um, we all know that potential clients can be a pain in the butt. So why, to kind of round it up, why does this 4-step process work so well?
Yeah. So let's think through. I'm thinking now about the firms that are using maybe 3 or 4 plus meetings, to get this done. I think what's really important about this is that it's simple and repeatable. And again, it depends on the firm that what type of firm you are and what type of work that you do and the clients that you're generally working with. So maybe instead of this being 30 minutes, this needs to be an hour long regularly or something like that. You can stretch it out because there's just more deep diving that needs to happen. But these same 4 steps can be used for any typology of work or anything like that. And it's a simple and very repeatable process. And I think what's important about it is that it's a solid structure that you can go into every single meeting with as you're having that first meeting with the client and know exactly how to move the meeting forward in a really effective way. And as you begin to do this more and more, one, you realize that again, it works for any type of client, but you also get much better at it, right? You get much better at active listening. You get much better at understanding, oh, that was a superficial pain. Let me ask an impact pain question. Let me understand the pain relief. And you'll notice yourself being able to relax more into the conversation and actually be so much more intentional while you're in those meetings and understanding more and more and kind of diving deeper and deeper into these client conversations, just because you are also familiar with this process and you know what's generally going to happen. When you put these like structures in place, it then becomes really obvious. The same, like you'll probably start hearing the same challenges over and over, and you might even start understanding the same impact pains over and over, and the same pain reliefs over and over. And what's great about that is that you then take that information back, you tell your marketing team about it, or if you're a smaller firm, you just take that into consideration with your marketing, right? And those pain points and those visions that clients have and the language that they're using should be used in all of your marketing materials, whether it's proposals, right? You want to use the client's language when you're mapping solutions back to them, or just on your website, right? That language that they're using, and
Like
we typically
we
work
hear
best with
you. This
these
is what
clients. Yeah,
right. This is what they're
we
saying.
hear you. We very much so understand exactly what your needs are, right? And so anytime that you can kind of focus on being as client centric as possible, not only in these meetings, but on your websites as well, in your marketing materials, leaning more on the client's stories and their emotions and their kind of feelings towards things is going to generally lend better than pitching up front or being really heavy about what it is that you do or showing your portfolio like Evelyn was talking about.
Yeah. So Pamela had a question that says, does anyone get turned off from saying you research them? I've never admitted to looking them up. I've had both happen. I don't think you have to be that upfront about it, right? Like I said, somebody could come in and say, through their research, they can find out that I have a podcast, Practice Disrupted, and they could say, oh, I just listened to your last episode of Practice Disrupted, and that's like a great opening question to the client. Or I was just on LinkedIn and I saw you, like, congratulations on your 1-year anniversary here, or I thought you passed 5 years here last month. That's incredible. But I have had people sheepishly say, I've looked you up on LinkedIn and I follow you, and I'm just really, I just have a question for you about X, Y, and Z. I'm not personally offended, but you don't have to say like you research them, I guess, hopefully that's helpful, Pamela.
Yeah. I wouldn't necessarily say I researched you, but I do think that's why I was saying, like, you kind of mentioned like the source of what you discovered, right? I was reading the bio. I saw the bio on your company page that you like this, or I saw on your LinkedIn that this just happened, right? These are like, it's public information. So from that standpoint, I think if it's public information, I think it's okay to mention. I'm not sure exactly
And
how you're
especially if
discovering
they're
private information, but
putting it out
yeah.
there, right? Yeah,
Right,
so
exactly.
they put it out there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But if I wouldn't say I saw on your Facebook page that this happened. I wouldn't say that. Try to keep it to the more formal instances, I guess.
Okay, do we have any other questions? One thing while we're waiting for questions to come in, because I'm going to flip this and bring AI into the conversation. So I've been doing a lot of interview questions where when I get set for interviews, I have a series of 100 conversations with 100 architects set up. And I have my series of questions, a structure around them, all for the reasons that you just said, but I put it actually into a table. And then you can go back and you can have AI analyze all of those things that you just mentioned, right? Like, what are the phrases
That's
that are
exactly
most
right.
occurring? What are, like, AI loves this type of structured data to be able to kind of analyze it for you. And then you can prompt from that, like, help me build out a like market message for my clients. So just like a how you can use AI in your everyday on the business side, operation side of things, in addition to the design side of things.
Yeah, I have found that's probably the best use case for AI, at least in my opinion, for just the average person, just for anyone, right? Because it's so good at diving through a bunch of information that manually would take you forever to do and to kind of suss out, to just ask AI, here's 100 responses to something, and what are the common themes that you're seeing? What's the language that people are using? How would you describe, how would you describe the ideal client profile of the people that are answering these questions? These help you to get a really good understanding of just how, what your ideal clients are, what their challenges are, and the language that they're speaking in, just so that you can relate to them at that level as well.
Yeah. So Sasha said 1705. I'm not sure what that means. If you could help us understand that, or if it was you were using the calculator and you accidentally typed in Zoom, that's fine too. So if you didn't know, this Acelab series is called Designing for Success. Sasha says, sorry, accident, perfect, no worries. Sorry to call you out like that. Feel free. Bo, can you launch that last question for us? We're almost at the top of the hour. So if you're interested in finding out more about practice of architecture, the practice community lab, where people like, actually I owe Tyler an invite to the lab, so he will be in there hopefully shortly. Oh, cool. And practice of architecture advisory services or future designing for success webinars, please let us know. But we do have 5 more minutes. Hopefully everyone got something new out of this conversation. And if not, just thank you for sticking with us for the hour. Any last questions out there in the last 5 minutes? Anyone just a big fan of Tyler on LinkedIn and want to say hello?
No fans. No fans.
Yes, big fan. See, Tyler. Aw, hello,
I'm not
Tyler.
following the chat, so I can't see it, but I appreciate whoever said that.
Eileen and Pamela says, yes. Eileen says, love you both. So I think, thank you. Now we're feeling the love. Thanks,
There it
good
is.
presentation. Okay. Well, if you have any questions, I think we are both on LinkedIn and it's pretty easy to get a hold of the two of us. Please feel free to follow up. Other than that, thank you everyone for joining us here on Acelab's Designing for Success series. Next month, we will have on the Slantis ladies, which will talk about what you need to move technology forward in your firm. And a hint is you could go and listen to the podcast that was released last Thursday, but they will dive deeper into innovation and practice on the technology side or cultural side. I don't know.
That's
Tune
awesome.
in.
Yes. Slantis is amazing. Everyone should go to that.
Okay. Thanks all. Thanks, Tyler.
See ya.
Oh, wait, Bo, did you want to say anything? Sorry.
No, fine enough.
Okay.
Thanks, everyone.
Okay. All right. Thanks.